I'm Kat Carter, Head of Marketing and a Digital Giving Specialist here at Hubbub. Thank you so much for joining myself and our speakers for today's webinar. This is the second in a three-part series where we'll be hearing from educational institutions, both here in the UK as well as in the US, who are currently running appeals to support students during these very challenging times. While there is a tremendous amount of vitally important work happening right now to support our frontline workers, as well as funding to aid research into finding a vaccine, there is also a need to ensure that our current and future students who attend our educational institutions have the ability to remain at these institutions in the months and years that follow the pandemic. There are many institutions out there who are currently running student-related appeals, and we hope that the experiences shared with you today will be helpful as you too consider the ways in which you may move forward with conducting your own student-focused appeals. For many students and their families, this will be a worrying time. Students who work to afford their education may find themselves worrying about how they will pay for their living costs while they are currently unable to work. Care for international students who are unable to travel home will become important for those institutions who still have students on campus at this time. And finally, there may be a worry from parents who are concerned over being able to still afford the tuition for their children when they themselves are unable to work as a result of the current climate. As we've seen over the last few weeks, the generosity of our supporter communities has never been stronger. Alumni and others are coming forward in their droves to support these initiatives. From those Hubbub customers who are running COVID-19 related appeals, we've seen a truly tremendous amount of support for a wide variety of projects that have brought our communities closer together in a united message of hope. Today, we'll hear from Matthew Ingram, Student and Young Alumni Officer at the University of York, and Chris Hartland, Regular Giving Officer at the University of Southampton. Both Matt and Chris will share with us the experiences their institutions have had through running their emergency student support appeals, how those appeals were facilitated, the results they've seen, and what's next for each. To ensure that your experience is uninterrupted by as few technical glitches as possible, we have pre-recorded the main portion of today's webinar. Once the recording has finished, Matt, Chris, and I will be on hand live to answer any questions you may have about how what was discussed today may relate to your own institution and how you are choosing to move forward. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them at any time using the Questions tab of the webinar screen. Your questions will come through to us and they will be anonymous, and we will try and answer as many as we can in the time that we have today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Matt.
Thanks, Kat. So a really quick introduction, just in case you wanted to put a face to the voice. My name is Matt Ingram. I am Student and Young Alumni Officer at the Uni of York, which basically means that I fundraise with, for and from student and recent graduate constituencies at the university. I do that through three principal channels. The first is crowdfunding, the second is community and events fundraising, and the third channel that I use are giving days. So a really quick overview just of York's context, I guess, as a kind of crowdfunding or as an organisation and a kind of charitable cause that's fundraising in this way. We launched our crowdfunding site in summer 2014. We were the first UK higher education institution to have our own crowdfunding platform, beating Southampton to the post, just about a couple of weeks off. So we've been crowdfunding for about 5.5 or 6 years now. And in 2019, we took the step to kind of diversify our crowdfunding platform, so that in effect it does exactly the same things as Just Giving does. So as well as students of York being able to fundraise for their own projects that are going on at the university, UStart now allows students, staff, alumni and friends of the university to digitally fundraise for charitable causes at the university, which is great. And so with that move being taken, we thought that we would get together a whole load of events and opportunities for people to take part, in and challenge themselves to fundraise for charitable causes at York. And we did that to coincide with the launch of our £120 million fundraising campaign, York Unlimited. So as part of that, we bought places on a load of charity runs. We had people doing fundraising pages to celebrate their anniversary. We've seen a bit more of an uptake in them fundraising through UStart. And we also launched our flagship community fundraising event, the Great York Walk. So things were in a really, really great place. And we were looking to have basically doubled the amount of income that we'd have seen into UStart in 2019, 2020, based on kind of previous year's performances. And then all of this happened. So at York, student support fund was our initial go-to for a kind of charitable giving fund. I know that universities like Oxford will have gone straight in with the research piece. I think Ulster as well have gone straight in with the research piece. For us, it's taken a little bit of time for our research pieces to emerge. It's taken a little bit of time for us to kind of coordinate all of our civic mission activities, but Student Support Fund was something that we went to straight away. The reason why a student support fund was our kind of initial go-to is just that among Russell Group universities, York is either the top university most years for bringing in pupils from state non-selective school kind of backgrounds, or we're kind of up there at the very top, and it kind of creating a diverse and inclusive kind of student community is something which has always sat right at the heart of what we do as a university. So we knew that students were going to be experiencing, among the kind of uncertainty of what's happening with my assessments and my grades, we knew that students were going to see an adverse effect financially as a result of coronavirus. So we decided to do something to kind of help that. So we launched the Emergency Student Support Fund, and as you can see, actually, we launched it on the 25th of March, so 2 days after lockdown was announced, which I think everyone was kind of pleased to have got it up and running so quickly. So that fund had an initial total value of £270,000, which was made up of redirected funds from other charitable funds that we have to support students and student causes at the university. And the awards that we offer are £500 each. And they are awarded to students who, in one way, shape, or form, are experiencing unexpected financial difficulties as a result of coronavirus and all of the restrictions that have come into place. So we're talking loss of jobs, we're talking increased kind of requirements to purchase equipment to enable distance learning. We're talking an increase in utility bills because you're not using campus electricity anymore, you're using all of your own electricity. We're talking all of that kind of stuff. And we prioritise support to the fund. I haven't put it here, but it's important to stress that we do prioritise access to that fund to people like care leavers, medics, and nurses, people with disabilities or long-term health conditions. So the people, the kind of demographics who are most vulnerable financially at the moment and who are most likely to be affected by coronavirus are the ones who get the priority on that fund. We received 795 applications in round one, and we managed to make 341 awards, which I don't know why I don't just write this number down. I always end up having to do like mental maths. So that's 341,000 divided by 2, which is 150, 170,000 pounds that we'll have awarded from our initial pot. And, we are sourcing more funds for the Emergency Student Support Fund from corporate bodies, from trusts and foundations, from kind of higher level donors. But we thought that, two things really. One, we felt that it was important that we were asking anybody to give, and that we were giving anybody the chance to offer support if they wanted to. And two, we saw this as a really great chance to kind of build some community and to encourage community giving amongst York alumni, staff, friends of the university, students, all those people. So we set up the Great York Pub Quiz. The Great York Pub Quiz, I'm sure if you've been online for more than 10 minutes, you'll have come across somebody either promoting a pub quiz or like a screen grab of people who have done a virtual pub quiz. It's a really, really popular community giving event at the moment. So we thought, why not just do our own and open it up across the whole York community? Our event was free to take part, and we encouraged donations right the way throughout from the very start of the journey, actually. So from the second you land on the fundraising page, right the way through to the end of the quiz, we were encouraging donations, even though obviously we had free access to participation, which kind of ethically, felt like the best thing to do. But also in terms of like fundraising practice, we were really trying to model ourselves on like a children in need style event where, if you wanted to, you could sit in front of your telly from 7 p.m. until 3 a.m. and not give a penny and still receive great content. But you would be heavily encouraged to donate. Seemed like the best thing to do and the most effective tactic for us to take in order to make sure that we were towing the line right with our fundraising messages. We had a page on YouStart, which acted as our main landing page for the event. And then from there, we sent people across to register via Eventbrite. So they just had to submit a couple of details. And the really good thing about using Eventbrite, it's our kind of standard platform across events now. But Eventbrite sent automated reminder emails 48 hours before our pub quiz, 2 hours before the event, and as the event started. And all of that was directing people back to YouStart. We found something really cool with a kind of Hubbub platform, which meant that I think for a long time, everybody's been able to put like YouTube videos or Vimeo videos kind of and embed them onto their fundraising pages. But we like to experiment at York, and we found out that you didn't even need to change the technology in order to facilitate kind of live web streams you didn't need any extra technology in order to embed live video streams from YouTube onto your Hubbub page. So that means that basically you can run a live event in the kind of left-hand side of the screen. And then you can have your live total and your donate button right next to all of that content. So we were hoping that that would add a really exciting, almost kind of like mini kind of giving day kind of element to our event, where people would be able to continually see how much we were fundraising live as those donations came in. We promoted the event over the course of 5 days. I think what's really interesting is now the fact that everybody's calendars have suddenly freed up. You don't need to give 3 months notice before an event. And actually that is compressed right the way down. So we launched with 5 days to go until the pub quiz. We modelled that of Joe Wicks's exercise classes. So Joe Wicks announced that he'd be doing exercise classes 5 days before the first class happened. We thought if it worked for Joe, it can work for us. And that's what we did. So the soft launch was the Tuesday after everybody came back from the Easter bank holiday. You'll see on the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we sent out targeted communications to different demographics mainly, so across staffs, alumni and student constituencies. But what's really interesting is that actually 106 sign-ups came over the weekend when we were doing no formal promotion. And I'm still trying to figure out why that might have been. I think it might be because people are kind of clicking onto the Eventbrite page and then just kind of leaving that tab in their browser while they decide if their friends or family are interested enough to be able to take part. And then when they know people are interested, they've got the tab there and they sign up. Like I say, with everybody needing so much less notice now to kind of get involved, you're seeing people kind of giving the, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do that, around 48 hours before the event takes place. You can watch the full live stream if you want. It's available at ustart.hubbub.net/York-pub-quiz. It's really great. Please give it a watch. Please make a donation as well. It'd be rude of me not to ask, and you can still make a donation if you'd like. Really important thing to note if you are going to watch is that the live stream was live for just under an hour before the event actually started. The reason being is that you just want to make sure that everything's running really smoothly with the stream. So you set it up with plenty of time to go, and then you can kind of accommodate, if there's a problem with your audio, you've got an hour to fix that, for example. Or if your internet speed is a little bit low, you've got an hour to fix that. So please do give it a watch, and kind of take it in. Alex, our host, runs virtual pub quizzes every Friday night, which is how I first heard of this. He's a young alum. He graduated in 2016, so I kind of see what he's up to on social media, and I thought I need to get him to do one of these for us. He's great. He's like a pro. I think that's two really important notes to take away from this. I'm looking at my time as well. I've got just under 5 minutes, but two really important things to note. We chose an alum to kind of front this first event from us. We felt that was really important for us to do. I could have sat down, read the questions out, and done the whole camera thing, and it would have been fine. But having Alex involved kind of really gave the event an extra kind of bit of authenticity. And yeah, I mean, the second thing is if you can get somebody involved who's au fait with the technology. Really luckily, Alex is running streams like this every week, so he knows how this runs, which took a lot of the pressure off me actually. So I would quite like to learn how to do these sorts of things, and it will be something that I'll have to do as we go into the future, because the York Pub Quiz was a really great success, and we want other people to do similar things. So I'm going to need to learn how to facilitate this kind of stuff. I know a little bit, not loads at the moment. So, in case you don't want to watch the live quiz right the way through, like I say, it's about 90 minutes long. Here's a really quick intro, or here's a really quick kind of overview of our our kind of format. So we would deliver, we did 5 rounds of 10 questions, and then we do like round one questions, and then go through round one answers, and then have a break. Um, what the breaks were really important because right before we'd go to a break, we'd make a light ask. We'd call the team captains to submit their scores so that they could go into our live leaderboard, for example. Um, and that is when people are going to be donating ultimately because, yeah, at the top, when they're answering questions, they're answering questions. When they're marking answers, they're marking answers. So ultimately, you want to give time for people to donate. So those breaks are vital, and also kind of include some time at the top of every round to kind of update on the leaderboard, to thank donors who've given, and to interact with player tweets and comments as well. We had some really, really fantastic responses, which, you want to be able to engage with those and respond to them live. So as you can see, we were really lucky. We had 175 registered teams. 514 participants actually ended up getting involved from 152 teams. Really good spread across like a range of constituencies, and a really, really tasty fundraising kind of total as well. So with Gift Aid, we managed to raise just over £2,000. So on top of all this really great kind of quantitative stuff, we've got some really, really nice qualitative feedback as well. Lots of people kind of getting involved from different countries, teams working across countries, which is amazing. I love these kind of like these screen grabs of Zoom calls, which just kind of illustrate that message of connectivity so well. And what's really nice to see as well is that people are asking us to do it again, which is what we will be doing. The quiz, we hosted it last Sunday, and it was just really, really nice moment for everyone. It's one of the things that I've been thinking about at the moment is, it popped into my head really randomly a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to take a bit of a detour, not too much. So there's a kind of an Academy Award winning short animation film called Logorama, which is a great film. Give it a watch. It's free to access on Vimeo, I think. But the song that kind of closes that film, the lyrics to it kind of go like, I don't want to start a fire. I just want to light a flame in your heart. And I think that's what events like the Big York Pub Quiz have helped us to do. We know that things like this aren't going to be the things that find the vaccine or the treatment for coronavirus. We're not saying that it's going to do that. What we want to do is bring people together and just do a little bit of good for people in our community at what is obviously, understandably, a really tricky time for so many people. So we're going to keep on lighting flames in people's hearts, hopefully by building on the success of the Big York Pub Quiz, repeating that, and hopefully trying to build like a bit of a virtual quizzing community is the aim for that. But we're also going to be diversifying our online community giving program. So, we'll be seeing more events, more virtual challenges. Everyone in the charity sector is talking about the 2.6 challenge at the moment, which has been set up by the team who normally run the London Marathon before it got cancelled. Everyone in the charity sector is talking about that at the moment. We might take part in that. We might kind of get a derivative or an iteration of that kind of going for our community. So hopefully we'll be able to introduce something like that, as well as cook-alongs and sing-alongs and readings and all that kind of stuff. And the reason that we want to do all of this stuff is, we are making money off it. We are building a community off it, but we also want to make sure that our audience are kept nice and warm and engaged, ready for the launch of a direct marketing appeal that we'll be doing in June. So we're going to do a big direct mail appeal. We do one every summer, and because of the changes, because not only because of the changes that we've seen in how we've needed to cancel or postpone some of our fundraising events and that kind of stuff. So we're seeing lots of fundraising income there. We're also seeing kind of increased demand from students, as you can see through the applications for our Emergency Student Support Fund. And we know that actually this is going to be a really tricky time for the institution as a whole. So it's really important actually that we press ahead with our direct marketing appeal. And hopefully events like this will keep the community nice and warm while we do those big fundraising pieces. Like I say, firstly in June, hopefully everything will be kind of back to normal-ish by autumn term, we pray, because that's our kind of telethon and our giving day. So if we can keep our community warm and engaged and giving to students until then, we'll be happy. So that's about it from me. I'm now going to pass over so that you can see what some of the lovely people at University of Southampton are doing.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. So my name is Chris. I'm the regular giving officer at the University of Southampton. I'm going to be talking to you today about our Southampton Coronavirus Response Fund, the work we're doing inside of that to support our students, and also how we conceived and implemented that fund in our work. So the fund came about out of a few conversations, but particularly one I had with the head of student services at Southampton, Florence, and my line manager, Susanna. We were discussing some email fundraising activity that we had planned to be doing anyway, fundraising for our student hardship fund, and how we were going to, sort of slightly change that or tweak the messaging in light of the coronavirus crisis. What ended up happening was not really a small tweak, but basically a whole snowball happening. Susanna took it to our development SMT meeting. It got combined with a whole bunch of other stuff, and what came out the other side of that was the Southampton Coronavirus Response Fund. So it's a discretionary fund, which is managed by a disbursement committee. That's the boring bit that we don't really tell our alumni. Basically, it's for anything coronavirus related at Southampton. So it's not just for research, and it's not just for students. It can be for anything that is helping tackle coronavirus or the effects of coronavirus in a Southampton context. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the projects that we have allocated money to in a moment. One of the big reasons why we wanted to launch a whole new fund, rather than just doing like a sort of one-off appeal or a sort of slightly smaller piece of work or just repurposing our planned activity, was that we as people felt kind of helpless, as I think we all did and to some extent still do. We wanted to help, but didn't seem to be a way to help, apart from staying inside, but that doesn't really help with the feeling of helplessness. But actually, in times of crisis, communities come together. They come together to do things and to make sure that the community survives. And we can see that in all sorts of things that are going on at the moment. People going outside and clapping the NHS every Thursday is a great example. It means that people can feel a part of something and feel like they're supporting things. But we also see it right down to very little kids and things like Joe Wick's PE lessons, for example. Everyone around the country now it seems like gets together and does this fun thing every morning. And that's another kind of community. And as a university or as an educational institution, we obviously have our own communities. We have our alumni, we have our supporters, we have our staff and our students. And those communities also need a way to express their help and to give real, tangible help to people who have been really badly affected by this current crisis, and to support each other during this crisis. So we got this off the ground quite quickly for Southampton, or at least the sort of length of time between actually getting the idea and implementing it was very, very short. So we got the green light for it on a Monday. I think I got pulled into some kind of like emergency Teams meeting around Monday lunchtime at the sort of end of March, and basically told that I needed to kind of put together all the digital infrastructure inside a week. And after I picked my jaw back up off the ground, that was what we started doing. And it really was an all hands on deck kind of thing. So we've got a team of about 35-ish at Southampton, and literally everyone has been working on this pretty much all the hours that were sent to us. So there's a number of things that allowed us to get it off the ground really quickly, and I'll go through those now. I should also say this is a really slapdash presentation. I haven't had much time today to put it together, and I apologise if it's not in the most sensible order. Yeah, we'll deal with that as it comes up. So to start off with, we needed the infrastructure to allow donations online. Obviously, we can't accept checks anymore. We still get quite a lot of checks. Our alumni like to give them to us. That's fine normally, but right now it's not. We're not in the office. We can't accept things that other people have handled. Really, like it's just not going to happen. And also, our university host team aren't working at full capacity at the moment because they can't, because they need to be looking after themselves. So we needed a dedicated fund page, and I will come on to that in a minute. But thank you very much to Hubbub and to Kat for getting that up so quickly. We were lucky in the fact that we have had to set this kind of thing up quite quickly in the past. There's been a couple of other instances where we've needed to have like a public face for a fund really, really quickly. And having that experience made it slightly less terrifying to get it all together. Not much though, but we did get it up, and again, I'll show you that in a minute. So we decided to go out by email. It was really the only option that was available to us that we knew would get to people individually. Obviously, social media is great, but you can't like Facebook message all, however many thousand alumni you have. So we went for email. The first thing we did was that we did not segment. So normally, as I'm sure for everyone else it is, we segment quite heavily. We cut out a whole bunch of alumni who we know just don't really care about fundraising. We cut out people who have never donated, even though we've emailed them 35 million times, all that kind of thing. We didn't do that here. The only segmentation that was done was to, we've got quite a big US-based alumni community. We took them out of the kind of like general email, and we put them in their own little email. They got the same email, but we direct US donations via the British Schools and Universities Foundation, and also we didn't want our many thousand US alumni to get the email at like 3 o'clock in the morning, because for obvious reasons they're not going to be super inclined to read it. Everyone else was in the same bunch, so major gifts donors were in here, non-alumni people who supported the university were in here, anyone who that we had a contactable email address for, it has been emailed. They went on Reddit, but they have been emailed. This was also really important because it sped up our data selection. When we're trying to email this many people, the idea of trying to put together like 25 different segments in a week, it just isn't feasible. And then to have that data checked and everything else is just not a good idea. So simple segmentation, get it off the ground quickly and worry about that kind of thing afterwards. So the next thing we did was that we had a vague idea of what the money was going to be needed for, but we didn't have impact stories and we didn't have case studies because the work hadn't happened yet. It's hard to say exactly what your money's going to go and do when the researchers who are doing research or the students who need help either don't know what their research is going to achieve or don't know what help they're going to need. So we kind of relied on the fact that we had a pretty good idea of what was going to happen, and also our alumni are fairly used to seeing the kind of things that we do with donations. They're used to seeing stuff about student hardship, they're used to seeing stuff about medical research, and that was what we trusted in, basically. We did provide some kind of like examples of like your money might go to help students who are in need right now. They need your support, but really focusing actually in the ask around the fact that it was something that you could do, that you could help with, rather than saying exactly where and how the money was going to be spent. We also focused on getting the basics in place, and I think when you're launching something this fast, it's quite easy to skip things that would have been to our costs later on. So we're very, very lucky in our development team to have fantastic operations and data teams who do really, really amazing work keeping the whole ship afloat. And for things like gifts administration, knowing that there is, to say there's the capacity probably is a bit of a lie, but that people were willing to put in the work to make sure there was the capacity to deal with hundreds of gifts at a time was really important. The next thing was gift acknowledgement, which, for us is just making sure that we've got nice thank yous ready to send out to people when they donate. So we also used some really inclusive messaging. What I mean by that is not saying as an alumnus of this university or as a supporter of this university or thank you for your previous gift or anything like that. And it really ties back into us not doing segmentation, in that we're just saying, look, regardless of who you are, what your affiliation is to the university, you can help right now, and we need your help right now to deal with this crisis. And that really was as complicated as the ask got. I'll talk about digital infrastructure in a sec, but just to come back to the inclusive messaging, one of the other things we did was that we didn't use ask amounts. So in the email, which I show you now. Okay, so this is the email that we sent out to launch the fund. And as you can see, it is all about what you can do. So we had already sent out a little bit of information to our alumni and supporter community about what the university was doing to tackle coronavirus, and what our researchers were thinking about doing, and what our students were doing, etc., etc. And then it's written from the VC. Very, very thankful to have his support on this. And he's launching the fund. So we had a little bit of information about some very sort of initial things that medicine were doing, and then we also had a little bit of stuff here about students, particularly medical students getting involved in our work, but still needing support during that. And then to come back to the ask amounts, which I think is what I was talking about before my computer had a little crisis, we didn't use an ask amount. So the ask is just donate now. It's not donate £5 now. We didn't segment, and we didn't tailor ask amounts to people because, to be honest, there wasn't time, and we didn't have the option to do that. But if I click donate now, it takes us straight through to here. which is the donation page. This is where people land. And it was really amazing to be able to have just this simple functionality of this is how many people like you have donated, this is how much they've raised. And particularly for people who were coming on early on, already see that like maybe 50 people or 60 people or 100 people had already given, but you only got this email 10 minutes ago. That's really powerful. It demonstrates the immediacy of the response to a really difficult situation, and like I said earlier, reinforces that sense of community and that they are part of something larger than themselves that is coming together to tackle this crisis. There's a little bit of text here. It's basically just a sort of rundown and a sort of secondary ask to tell people about what the fund is. We've got a nice scrolling donor wall here, and then we included a little bit of information at the bottom for people to contact our Associate Director for Development, Catherine, if they wanted to make a gift of more than £10,000. And then this link takes us back to fund page. So this is the fund page on the university website. We're hoping to fill this out with more content in the future. It's a little bit redundant right now, but it is a nice place where we can have some articles about the stuff that the university is doing. We don't have that much about students on here right now because basically because the student services team is so busy helping them. But I'll come back to this in a minute. So the expandable digital infrastructure I talked about is that university fund page. So not the donation page, the university fund page, which I just showed you. I will come back to that in a minute. So what's the response been like? There's been about a 50-50 split in donation amounts between regular gifts and major gifts. That is probably going to change as time goes on because we've probably peaked and we're on the downward slope now in terms of the rate of regular gifts coming in, whereas the rate of major gifts coming in will increase as our face-to-face fundraising team have more of a chance to develop relationships around this fund. There's been lots of new donors. I don't think over half is actually correct. I'm not entirely sure why I wrote that. It's like somewhere between 40 and 60% of donors to the fund have not donated before. That's been really interesting. I think it certainly demonstrates that there is appetite in our community for donating to the university. It's just they don't always feel like there's a need. And that, in terms of our long-term planning, is certainly very interesting and something we need to think about. Right now, it's just great to see that the community is coming together to support this. Need has also risen, so the student-focused angle of this has become more and more important, or needed the funding more and more as time has gone on. It was always important, but the need has increased. When our head of student services launched their sort of like application process for emergency help, I think it was a couple of days before we launched the fund itself, because she had enough money that she was able to get it off the ground. And by, I think, 36 hours into that being open, we had something like 170 applications for help. And pretty much all of those were from students who really were in difficult situations, who were living paycheck to paycheck, or even not even living paycheck to paycheck, living in overdrafts, and who had lost jobs and who simply weren't going to be able to afford to pay rent or buy food or even get home to stay with their families. And that is an incredibly difficult situation to be in. I only graduated a few years ago myself, and the idea of being in that situation is really properly terrifying. And I know that is the reality for a lot of people across this country, but the people who can help are our students. So the money that student services had for that fund was obviously finite. So is the money that we're getting from our donors, obviously, but there's a lot more of it. So the disbursement committee who manage this fund have been allocating money to the student side of this quite strongly in the last week or so that we've had the ability to do that. Response has been really strongly tied to what we're putting out. So the biggest peaks in, or biggest spikes in donations come after we send an email. So we sent one on Friday when we launched, and then we sent another one, I think it was the Wednesday of the week after, basically saying, like, look, you're amazing. We've already raised over £100,000 from, I think it was 400 or 500 donors at that point. If you haven't already given, here's another chance. That is basically a lot like what you do for something like a Giving Day or a crowdfunding project, and that's sort of the technique that we've been using here. The other thing that's been really important is social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, press releases, local news coverage. We've been really lucky to have with BBC and with our local newspaper, basically doing everything we can to create lots of noise to keep reminding people that this is happening, this is something they can help with, and to keep that constantly in their minds. So even if we're not asking them every day, they're hopefully seeing something about coronavirus and Southampton somewhere in their lives during the day, and it just keeps that at the top of their head. So if they are not sure about donating, hopefully that persuades them to do so over time. Finally, and this is maybe a little bit more of a kind of internal highlight than something that will be applicable elsewhere. We sometimes struggle to get staff involvement with some of our fundraising work. Our staff have been enormously supportive of things like our Centre for Cancer Immunology campaign, which closed a couple of years ago. We sometimes struggle a little bit more to get that support for student-focused work, whereas in this situation, people want to help, regardless of whether or not it's students or research or whatever. People just want to help, and we've had a really high staff involvement, which has been great to see. So going forward, the plan is to basically create more resources for the community. So we'll carry on fundraising, but we're also going to be trying to do things for the community as well as asking for our community's help. So that's going to be through things like news articles, which is fairly, news articles, blogs is fairly normal stuff. We're also looking to do some video lectures around, probably initially around coronavirus related stuff, but also just things that people might find interesting. I think the first one of those is launching next week with a guy called Andy Tatum, who works in our demography department, and he's been doing all sorts of statistical global mapping of coronavirus stuff, and I think he's talking about that. Stewardship is obviously a really important thing, and rather than kind of sticking to the same thank you once a year thing, which we haven't always been that great at doing even that in the past, we are trying to update donors really regularly, and this is something I'm really keen to carry on doing, is saying both to donors and non-donors, this is the impact that your community is having, regardless of whether you're able to give, and it's important to remember that not all non-donors don't want to give, maybe they just can't, particularly with so many people struggling with their employment situations right now. This is the success that you are a part of. As an alumnus of this university, this is what you have achieved. And that's something which we're going to be doing, like I said, fairly regularly, probably on a bi-weekly or a monthly basis. So we're not over egging the pudding, but making sure that people are buoyed up by the fact that they're a part of something amazing. And part of that is gathering case studies and impact stories, and particularly for the student side of things. It's really hard to do that before you launch a fund, because I was emailing colleagues in student services and saying, is there any chance I can have a quote or an image or a story? And they said, to be honest, we're flat out. We don't have time to collect that right now, or we can get it to you in a few days, but we can't do it for the launch, or for the second email. It might be something that comes afterwards, because they were just so busy making sure that students had roofs over their heads and food on the table, which at the end of the day, it is kind of more important than a case study or an impact story. We can tell those stories later, we can demonstrate that impact as we go forward, but students need to be helped first and foremost, and that is what they focused on. They have been amazingly good at getting me quotes and things as they've been able to, but keeping that kind of working relationship and understanding that they are in incredibly difficult situations and incredibly emotionally draining jobs right now. A lot of the time we're simply doing frontline social work with students is really important, I think, for any kind of student-focused thing in this time. So finally, I'm just going to talk a little bit about, I need to stop saying that phrase, but anyway, I'm going to talk about what we do differently. I think it's probably a little bit early for me to really look back and say what we would do differently, but there are a few things which definitely need some work. The first one is don't be so worried, because it was kind of terrifying. We had no idea if this was going to work. We thought it probably would. We kind of just trusted that our alumni community were as lovely and generous as they are. And it's great that they are, but it was scary to launch. And yeah, I think trusting that we knew what we were doing, particularly for me, would be a big thing going forward. The other thing is thinking a little bit more about the user journey earlier on. I don't think we've made it complicated, but we've built some web pages like the university-based fund page, which aren't super necessary right now, and there's been a little bit of duplication in web page functionality with some stuff that our colleagues in communications and marketing have been doing, which it could have been avoided, or maybe it couldn't. It's hard to keep track of everything all the time in an organisation the size of a university. Finally, I think we really should have been planning for the future earlier on, and I don't mean like the long-term future. We'd kind of thought a little bit about the long-term future, to be honest. Like we know how we're going to deal with donors to this fund going forward, but what we do in the next 3 to 6 months, I guess it's hard to know that because I don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months. But I think maybe a little bit more planning would be good. Yeah, so that's me. I'm sorry if this has been slightly rambling, but hopefully it's been informative. I'll just leave my email up here for a minute, or I am occasionally checking LinkedIn and things like that if you want to contact me that way. But if you've got any specific questions, I think there's a Q&A after this, but we'll find out in a minute. Do feel free to email me. And thank you very much for your time.
Hi, everybody. Kat here from Hubbub, and both Chris and Matt are here. Chris, you are correct. There is a Q&A after this. So we will jump into a couple of questions. We have a couple already, so we will get to those. Not sure if, Chris, your mic is maybe... Nope, there we go. I think you're joining us now.
I am. Hello.
Great. Matt, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Yeah. Yay!
Yay! Yeah, I think there was a little bit with the recording where it was a little bit quiet, but we are recording this, so if you want to watch it back and kind of get another kind of go at what was said during the webinar, you can definitely look at the recording and do that. Yeah, so I really hope that what was said from both Chris and Matt today was really useful for those of you who are thinking or are currently running student-related COVID appeals, just to see how the two institutions took very different approaches, which I think is something to kind of have a look at, but also to really understand why they took those approaches. And for me, and from knowing their kind of program so well, because we do work quite closely with them. And I had a little stunt of working at Southampton for a while. Matt's little dig there. We launched just shortly of Southampton. always the banter, the crowdfunding launch banter.
Always.
Yeah. But Yeah, but you guys, you both started with a similar need in that you had students who you knew would need support during this very challenging time. But then you went down two very different roads, neither one being, the right or I don't want to say wrong, but that's the word that's coming to mind. But what was right for your community? So knowing, York, you have a very strong community giving presence, and with your Giving Day and the Big York Walk and engagement with those audiences is really key for you. So doing an event like the pub quiz makes a lot of sense for your community and where your culture is right now. And then with Southampton, you're not far out from the Cancer Immunology campaign. So it does make sense that this is something that is very similar because there is a research angle, but then you also have an opportunity to tell alumni and other donors about the student support angle and to wrap that up really nicely in a kind of general fund. So I feel like the roads that you both traveled down were really important. And I guess and really important for your cultures and making those decisions that was what was right for you. And I guess what I want to say to anybody who's listening and thinking about what should we do, of having a little look back and saying, okay, what do we know about our community? What do we know that they like? What do we know what works? And then move forward from there, perhaps to find the kind of niche that your supporter community would engage with at this current time. So on to our questions. So there was a question that I know the answer to, but for those who are listening, was that did you already have a fund set up in place that supported students who kind of found themselves needing hardship support?
So the kind of crude answer to it is no. So before all of this kind of happened at York, we would fundraise. Our two kind of flagship scholarships were the York Opportunity Scholarship, which helps people as they come into university. And then we had a scholarship called the York Futures, we still have them. The York Future Scholarships aid kind of the promotion and pursuit of employability enhancing activities while people are at York. The student hardship piece was looked after by our student finance and support unit, using money from OFS and all that kind of stuff. So the crude answer is no, we didn't have a fund like we have now, but we did have other kind of funds to support students from less socioeconomically diverse backgrounds.
So it was kind of the decision to repurpose that money. Is that right?
Yeah. And some of that was, some of that money was due to be awarded. In fact, a pretty large chunk of that money was due to be awarded over May and June. So one of the York Future Scholarship, for example, was coming up for disbursement in May. And then in June, we were going to be handing out, we were going to be dispersing grants to students through our annual fund. Obviously, the future for both of those funds immediately has kind of changed pretty dramatically, and we knew that this was where the need would be better situated. So, it was about just repurposing.
Yeah, and I think that's something that donors would definitely understand, given the time period that we're in. So if anybody is thinking about, can we repurpose funds? I think as long as you communicate with your donors, you're really transparent about what the needs are. Few of them will come back to say that they're not happy with that because I think we all understand the current situation and where we find ourselves. Chris, how about you guys?
So Southampton does have a dedicated student support fund. It's called the Student Support Fund, helpfully. And so the sort of seed money for the student support angle of our coronavirus fund, so that the money that the student services team started to disperse before we started getting fundraising income came from the student support fund. And I just closed our telephone campaign before all this happened, so we were fortunate to have a fair amount of money in that pot. That initial money is pretty much all gone now, and has all gone now, and we're starting to use some of the money from our coronavirus fund for student support stuff. We're just fundraising for it as the Coronavirus Response Fund, not fundraising for it as the Student Support Fund, because it's part of a bigger piece now.
Excellent, great. I know I'm very conscious of the time. We will run over just because I think there are some questions here that we would like to answer. It's very good questions. So if you can join us, please join us. But if you have to rush off, we won't be offended. And you can always catch all the answers on the recording later. But we will continue. So, Chris, I just want to go back to you, and also, Matt, you can feed into this. But that relationship that you had with your student support colleagues who run and manage the fund and kind of take over that in student services, do you feel that that relationship helped you to move quickly when you needed to make a decision about what you were going to do?
Yes, absolutely. And that's been one of the things which I've been really working on since I started at Southampton, is making sure we've got really strong, professional links, but also friendships with colleagues across the university, so that if, things happen unexpectedly like this, we're able to respond really quickly to it. I was a little bit lucky, I guess, in that I already had a meeting in the diary with Florence, our head of student services, for like the first day that we were working from home. But equally, I talk to Florence, most days at the moment by email, by Teams, whatever, just keeping up to date with what they're doing. And that's, really helpful for something like this. And she also sits with our new head of widening participation, Gino, on the disbursement committee. So they have a direct involvement in discussions about where the money's going, when it's coming in, how much, at what time, all sorts of things like that.
Excellent.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I think you just raised like quite a pertinent point, Chris, is that, obviously having a really great relationship with student support is kind of vital. But I think it's really important to kind of, even if it's just a really quick triangulation of all of the different areas, I think it's important for that to be done. So at York, our widening participation, our head of widening participation sits within student recruitment. So there was a little bit of work that we needed to do to kind of team up with student support, but then also kind of make sure that our widening participation team and student recruitment were kind of all on board and the course of action.
Great, excellent. So for anybody who is listening and thinking beforehand about the relationships that you have on campus and within your environment of your institution, one of the things on your to-do list when you get back is having a coffee with somebody in the university who that relationship could benefit. Just in general, I know that relationship at Southampton is always appreciated because they get great stories from students who are being supported through that team. But now in the situation that we find ourselves, that relationship has become even more important because you don't have to start it from scratch. You can just move forward with the relationship you have, and this probably will strengthen it because of the situation we all find ourselves in. Great. So there was a question about for those students who obviously got their grants, that's wonderful and that's great. However, for those students who didn't get a grant, did you find that there was any backlash from that? And I think that was particularly a question maybe for York.
Yeah. So from what I've heard, I don't have access to the inbox, and I'm not answering queries directly regarding the Emergency Student Support Fund. But I haven't heard of anyone who's come back with a particularly angry response. But in our kind of in our letters where we notified people that we weren't getting grants, we made sure that we were signposting to like our local authority who have a kind of grant scheme available. We were signposting to places for additional maybe emotional support, and we also, like, this is just round one. I think the plan is to open kind of one round a month. So yeah, we were definitely inviting students to apply again if they felt that their circumstances had changed kind of this time next month.
Okay. Yeah. We did a webinar, which is the first series in this 3-part series, with South Dakota State University, and they shared with us their kind of application page. And on the page was a list of things that would be considered for financial support. And they also had a list of things that wouldn't be supported by the kind of emergency relief. And they were kind of things around bills, so cell phone bills or mobile bills. But it was a kind of good way to say from the very beginning, before people apply, this is what we will accept and this is what we won't accept, so that people are very clear. And maybe you then don't have to say no to as many people, because you've made it really clear what the criteria are before students apply. So that might be an approach that people could go with. So we have another question here from somebody who are getting ready to launch a similar appeal in terms of student support. And they wanted to know why you went with the kind of maximum of £500 for the award, and was there maybe a conversation before the decision around a more flexible approach? So, how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things would have informed that decision. First was looking at actually how much money we had to give out, and thinking, okay, how can we make sure we're making the biggest impact with this money, and that we're reaching absolutely everybody who needs to be helped. We had no kind of idea how many applications we were going to get in. We have a student body of about 18,000 students, and with that initial pot of 270,000, that probably works out at 5,400 students that we'd have been able to help with that money alone. I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was first of all, it was looking at how much we had and how much impact we felt we could make without really knowing supply and demand. And secondly, the £500 is, I think it's kind of meant to cover somebody for a short period of time. And obviously where we're at the moment, where we're reevaluating the kind of lockdown procedures every 3 weeks. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't giving awards of, say, £3,000 to somebody who would say, support me over the next 3 months.
Right.
Go on. Sorry.
No, so just to say that it kind of, so one of the things that you could do is having that kind of monthly round and saying, you can apply as many times as you want in these periods, but, it'll just be £500. And that should hopefully, for, a student looking at, their living costs of what they kind of need to make sure that they can get by, could be £500 for 1 month, and then they can apply the next month and see where they are. So I think if you're concerned about not being able to provide enough money, maybe you could have, rounds of funding. People can apply more than one time. And you can also look at things on a kind of week by week or bi-weekly basis to see how the situation is moving and changing.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing as well is that we have a really honest and kind of constructive relationship with our student union as well. So we trust that if our student union was saying, do you know what, this really isn't enough money to give somebody in one round, we'd kind of react to that feedback as well. So it was a kind of an educated guess, I guess. But yeah, I mean, if people came back and suddenly we were needing to hand out awards of up to £1,000, I think we'd listen to that feedback and take it on.
Sure. Yeah. So there are some extenuating circumstances that sometimes don't sit outside. So if they have somebody they can contact, maybe a contact on the page that, on the application page, maybe they can get in touch and there can be a conversation around what that student's needs may be. Great. Yeah. Anything from your side to add, Chris, about that?
Not really, because I'm just not really involved with actually sort of giving the money to the students. Florence handles that. She is great at doing her job, and I let her get on with it. So yeah, that's it from me.
Yeah, no, I think it's great to just kind of talk about, diversification of tasks and having somebody who, that's their job and they do that every day. So let them get on with it. And yeah, no, I'm sure they're doing a great job. So for anybody who is, so there's, for Southampton especially, so this might be a question for Chris. Your major gift team, so you've had some major gifts into the fund, and how are your major gift team kind of still connecting with those donors? Are they creating new relationships with anybody? And how are your major gift team still getting on when they can't have those face-to-face meetings?
So they are pretty much on the phones all day, every day, talking to anyone who will be spoken to, pretty much. We've had, I think, I can't put a number on the number of major gifts we've had in, but probably about 150,000-ish now of the 280-odd thousand that we've raised has been from major gift donations. We've had some of that from private individuals, and some of that, or at least one of those donations, has been a larger amount from a charitable trust. I think it's hard for me to talk about exactly what they're doing day to day, because I've been so busy and they've been so busy that I haven't really had much of a chance to catch up with them. But from what I've heard, people want to talk, and a lot of people who maybe they've been struggling a little bit to get in contact with are really pleased to take a call now, because it's a chance to do something useful. Like I said in my presentation, people want to help, and actually offering them the opportunity to do so is, I think, gratefully received, and obviously their donations are also gratefully received. So I think we'll probably see quite a big uptick in not necessarily major gifts size donations, but donations from major gifts prospects in the next few weeks. I know that a lot of our face-to-face fundraisers are being quite careful about how they phrase the asks that they're making, because people's finances, particularly if they are retirees, have probably taken quite a big hit if they're relying on investments or things like that. So that's just something we're being a little bit careful around. But yeah, I don't have a lot of information on that, but that's sort of what little I know.
Yeah. Well, I think the big takeaway there that we're hearing from lots of people when I ask this question is that the conversations are still happening. So they're kind of not letting the fact that they can't speak with people face to face be a barrier to those conversations, and to just have a conversation with your donors at any level. So if you're doing it en masse, making sure that you're emailing them and keeping in touch and on social media. But if you have your major gift donors and your legacy donors, picking up the phone and giving them a call, and not letting the kind of lack of face-to-face ability right now stand in the way of that relationship. But also, you're very right to also say about, having an appropriate conversation about, the financial needs of the university, but also keep in mind with the financial needs of the individual. But I think regardless of if somebody is able to help, that reaching out on that phone call will be really valuable. And also asking their opinion about, what they kind of think at the moment, that could be, really good feedback, even if they're unable to make a gift at this time, to kind of let you know that they're with you, even if they can't kind of give. Great. I think there's a request here from somebody who would like the email you sent out, Chris. So I will put you two in touch.
That's right. I've got her email address.
And you did on it.
Yeah, I'm emailing you right now, Jess. It's all
right. Efficient as always. And then I think so. We don't want to run over too much and steal too much of people's days, but I guess, and there's no right or wrong answer to this question, but where do you think that we'll kind of go from here in terms of how we might anticipate the need going forward for students?
So I think we're going to see two kind of really big needs that we're going to have to respond to. The first is around housing. So obviously, a load of students are going to be at the point over the next 3 months where their tenancies are just about to come to an end. And not just that, but you have to put your first payment down on your next house. which normally isn't covered by student finance anyway, because you only get 3 payments a year. So I think housing is going to be a really big one. The other thing, which is I think is going to be important to stress, is that I worry about banks and access to overdraft facilities for students. But obviously, students get interest-free bank accounts, but with the changes that the banks are currently having to make, I wonder if students are going to have to feel the brunt of some of those changes. Not in terms of having interest applied to their current overdraft, but in terms of extending overdrafts that haven't already kind of reached their maximum limit. I think that we might kind of see a lot of students I'm trying to extend my overdraft and the bank just aren't letting me.
Yeah. I think that's really great insight for people who are still thinking, is supporting students and setting up a fund or doing engagement activities around kind of this, is it something, are we too late? But it sounds like people aren't too late. And if you set something up now or in the next couple of weeks, there will still be needs in terms of what students at your institutions will come across. And that support will be greatly appreciated when the time comes. Anything else from you, Chris?
No, I agree with everything Matt just said. I think we're probably going to see an increase in need rather than a decrease the longer this goes on. And I think one of the things that we've been a little bit careful about is, although we've raised quite a lot of money right now, we're being quite careful not to disperse it all right now, and to keep a little bit sort of on the back burner, so that if there is a second spike of applications for student support staff, or if we find a magic cure or whatever, we have money sort of there that we can disperse, and the disbursement committee will be meeting weekly to discuss where that money's going and how we're apportioning that, and looking and trying to plan for the future as much as we can.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you guys so much for sharing your insight and sharing the experiences that you've both had. 2 very different approaches, but both valuable nonetheless. So thank you very much. So we have another webinar, last one in this series, on Friday with the universities of Brighton and Manchester. So Ruth Carpenter and Gemma Gurr will be joining us. So another kind of group of insights there, and from institutions who are at different stages in their fundraising process for student support. So that definitely will be one to watch. We also have other webinar series on our website. So if you're looking for more webinars to occupy your time, always great for a Friday afternoon, I say. You can visit the webinar section of our website and find more webinars. We also have a fundraising copy checker, which is really useful if you're writing fundraising copy right now. And so, I imagine lots of us who are here today are writing fundraising copy. But it's a really great tool. If you've used anything like Grammarly or the Hemingway app, it's very similar to that. It gives you a score. It's slightly addictive when you're trying to make sure you get 100 out of 100. I keep using it, and finding it really useful. So you can use that. It's a free resource from the Hubbub team. And then we have lots of blogs that we've written in the last couple of weeks about the things that we're seeing and how things are changing. And we hope to bring you more blogs and more webinars as the situation continues to evolve. You can find those on our website, also on our LinkedIn via Hubbub Fundraising. So just a final thank you to our speakers, to you guys, especially those who've stayed with us throughout the entire time. And if you're watching the recording, thanks so much for signing up. We hope to see you at a webinar soon, or a face-to-face physical event soon. Won't that be nice? But for now, I hope that you all have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we shall speak to you soon. Thank you.